Everyone. Welcome aboard to today's Adobe Apps for Education webinar. This is our second lot in our new series, and today we're going to be focusing on Lightroom. And we have two presenters. This morning we have Tim Plumer Jr., who is a Senior Consulting Manager for Adobe Systems, and this afternoon we'll be having Jim Babbage, who's part of Tim's team and as solutions consultant. So this morning I think I'm going to, if you are looking for more information about Tim, have a look at his Behance portfolio, and also I'll pop the link for that up shortly, and hopefully you can use that. So I'm going to hand over to Tim now, who's, as you know, going to lead us through the sessions. Tim, let's just hope that goes back. Are you there, Tim?
I am. How's everyone doing today? I'm just going to back up through the slides. Sorry, I was looking through them and I forgot to reset them. There we go. Back up.
All right, and I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to annoy you at about 2 minutes to go. So see you later.
It won't be an annoyance. Thank you very much, and thanks all for joining this morning, evening, afternoon, whatever time it is where you are. I love working for a global company because I just never know exactly where I'm talking to people. I'm going to move fairly quickly through. We've got a half an hour to cover my favorite Adobe product. And what I want to do is set the stage this morning's session to kind of cover some of the basics, but I'm going to put the basics into a workflow that I've developed, and we'll get to that in just a moment. And then I'll encourage you to join us again at 6 o'clock Eastern time, whatever time that is. For Jim's going to kind of delve deeper into some of the things that, for the sake of time, I might be glossing over. So why are we here? We're here because of two things. One, Lightroom is a fantastic tool for helping you to manage photographs, especially for something like a yearbook or even like an athletics team year-end slideshow or things like that. And I've developed over the last 5 years of taking pictures of my daughter's soccer team, which coincidentally, the reason I'm not doing the 6 o'clock session, and thankfully Jim could step in, is because my daughter's soccer team's homecoming is today, and they wanted me to come shoot the game. But what I'm going to be sharing with you is the stuff that I've learned over time that has made it more efficient for me to get this work done, especially when you think about the fact that you've got students and faculty and staff and all these different people coming in at very different levels, participating in this world of shooting stuff. How do you manage all of that? And so we're going to focus on that for this morning session. I will talk a little bit about doing some development work and how to make the pictures actually look a lot better. And that's something Jim's going to cover in some more detail later on this afternoon. We're talking about Adobe Photoshop Lightroom. So it is a standalone product. It is a photography-based product, or it is aimed at photography, and it's really solely focused on that. It does video because now cameras have video in them, but it's really about a photography workflow. And what about Bridge in Photoshop? I just wanted to give you a quick note about that because I get that question a lot. Why wouldn't I just use Bridge in Photoshop? And the answer is efficiency. Lightroom is set up to make it more efficient for you to get images onto your system, to weed them out, tag them, know where they are, what they're about, and do your editing as a part of a workflow. Whereas Photoshop and Bridge they serve many, many masters, whether it's image compositing, creating art that never existed, before you started painting in Photoshop and things like that. So although I'll say Photoshop and Bridge are a superset of what Lightroom does, Lightroom is so focused that I never use Photoshop and Bridge unless, and again, you'll see this later this afternoon, unless I need to do some real compositing work or some touch-up work that Lightroom is unable to accomplish for me. So it is really aimed at the photographer, and it's good for its ability to do things I'm going to show you. So what I'm going to show you in the workflow I'm going to walk you through is shoot, import, manage, edit, and export. And I'm going to go light on the edit and export piece because that's something that Jim's going to cover in some more detail, especially the edit piece. But I have some advice for you about working with Lightroom it's all about working up to working with Lightroom. And I just wanted to cover these things because it will make your workflow in Lightroom better, but it will also make any use of photography better. Thing number one, shoot raw files. If you have a camera that supports it, and most DSLRs, the digital single lens reflex cameras, the kind with interchangeable lenses, have the ability to shoot in RAW. The files are bigger. they're not JPEG and they're not compressed, but the file size buys you, and I'm not sure exactly how well this is showing up in this presentation, but if you look at JPEG, and I'm sure you're all familiar with what happens to JPEG files, especially over time, or if you highly compress them, they look terrible. And when you're talking about files coming in as JPEG and then saving them out as JPEG, or maybe even working with them a little bit as JPEG and then saving them out, they start to look bad. So shoot in RAW if your camera supports it. If you're in the market for a camera, get the least expensive camera. I know budgets are always tight, but get the least expensive camera that can shoot RAW, and you'll be much better off. If you shoot in RAW, convert to DNG. And the reason that I say that, and I'm going to show you how to do this in Lightroom in just a moment, but the digital negative graphic format it's proprietary. We created it, but it's an open specification. We make the specs available to anyone. And by converting to DNG, you save a tremendous amount of file size, and because it's an efficient file format, the files tend to open more quickly, and you can work with them more quickly, even as raw files in Lightroom. The thing I like about it is that it shaves, in this case, it shaved 2 megabytes off the size of each file. Now add that up over 100, 200. I've come off the soccer field with 1,000 files. So do that math, and you can see that there's a file savings there. Converting to DNG doesn't change the file. It doesn't compress it. It makes it less proprietary than the raw formats that the cameras support. So it's something that I strongly recommend, and it's a one-step process, and I'll show you how to do it. I also don't recommend that you erase the cards. Most cameras have a card, like an SD card, that you store the photos on. Cards have gotten so inexpensive today that it's not a bad backup strategy to have the cards kicking around for, at least until you know you've moved the files onto your system and you've begun to work with them. So it's a good idea to save them. And because, you can get an 8 or even a 16 gigabyte card now in some cases for under $20, throw them in a card holder and save them until you know that the files are working in Lightroom in case anything should happen, the power goes out or whatever. If your files in Lightroom get chewed up, there'll still be copies on the card that you can work with. Granted, they won't be edited, but at least they exist. And that's just my contact information. I'm more than happy to have conversations with any of you directly about Lightroom. I love the product. It's my favorite Adobe software product. And it's because I'm a very avid non-professional photographer that I love it. So that's the presentation. Let's get over and take a look at some stuff in Lightroom. I think that's probably why you're all really here. So I'm going to share my screen, and you can see I actually went to Pip's website there. Now, I'm not sure how familiar with Lightroom, or I'm sorry, with Connect you are, but if you hover around the upper right of the pod, the share pod, you can click on a thing that'll put you into full screen mode, and you can then toggle back when you have questions. I recommend that because Lightroom is, there's a lot of interface here, and I've got a fairly large monitor, and it might be easier for you to see what we're doing. So what we're going to start with, I've got a catalog open here in Lightroom, but I'm actually going to create a new catalog, and I want to talk about a couple of things about creating catalogs that are important. For those of you who are not familiar with Lightroom, a catalog is the sort of location, the holding place, if you will, for all of your files. The great thing about Lightroom is that it doesn't embed the file in the catalog. So if your catalog dies, gets corrupted or whatever, I had this happen. The electricity company shut our power off one day in the middle of a Lightroom session I was working on. It killed my catalog. I could never open it again. But the files are external, and doing what I'm about to show you made it so my edits were maintained. So I'm going to start by creating a new catalog. You always have to work within a catalog in Lightroom. It just assumes that. I'm going to go ahead and just for the sake of this, I'm going to create a catalog, and we'll just call it, we'll name it after Pip, so I love her name. I'm going to go ahead and create a catalog. It takes a moment to create and open the catalog, and once your catalog is open, it will be empty. Of course, you only do this once. In fact, most people create a catalog for a given project and then keep that catalog forever. So I've got a catalog for all of my daughter's soccer team pictures. It's got about 15,000 images in it. And I've been using it for now 7 years, or not 7, sorry, 5 years. And it's, I still keep adding to it every day. So this isn't something you do every time you sit down in front of Lightroom. Most of the time you'll launch Lightroom, it will open up your catalog that you're working with, or you might choose another catalog from which to work, or within which to work. One thing though, this is very important. Under, and I'm on a Mac, I think it's under the Edit menu on a Windows workstation, but under the Lightroom menu on the Macintosh, you want to access the catalog settings. And for every catalog you ever create, you want to select automatically write changes into XMP. What that does is it takes the work you do in Lightroom, which normally is just, they're saved as a set of instructions. Lightroom never actually edits the file that you're working on. It writes a set of instructions based on your changes, your crops, your adjustments for color and all of that, and it writes it as an XML file, and it can either embed that XML file into the raw file, or it can keep it as a separate file, or it can just keep it in the catalog. You want it inside the file. That way, if your catalog dies, or if you give someone these raw files, then they can take these raw files and they can just import them into another catalog for Lightroom, and all your edits will be maintained. It's not on as default. I wish it were. I don't know why it isn't, but it's something that for every catalog, whenever you have a catalog, open it up, check its catalog settings, and make sure you have set automatically write changes into XMP. Now, if you don't do that ahead of time and you do it later on when you've got thousands of images in there, it will just take Lightroom a while to move those changes into the XMP file that then is a part of the file set. So it may take a while, but it will update and we'll do that for you. It's a best practice. I'm not even sure why it's an option. I think it shouldn't be. I think you should automatically do it. Okay, so once you've got your catalog set up, then from there on in, it's just a matter of bringing images in. In most cases, you'll be putting a card in the system. I've got my images on the hard drive to make it faster. So I'm just going to go ahead and click Import and copy as DNG. You definitely want to do that, in my opinion. Some people like to keep their NAF files or whatever, but the DNG file format is smaller, more efficient, and non-proprietary. So you can open files as DNG in a variety of different applications. Some of the proprietary camera formats aren't like that. And what I'm going to do is I've actually got a folder here. And this represents, so if you put a card in, you just point to the card using this file source thing here. These are my files that I've shot. They're NEF files. I'm actually, for this demonstration, I'm only going to bring one in because otherwise it will take longer than I want. So I'm going to uncheck all, bring one into this catalog, and select copy as DNG. And the first step to managing your files is to add keywords every chance you get. So when you're bringing files in, this is a set of files that are a soccer game. I'm going to type over here on the right hand where it says apply during import, soccer versus Westbrook, that's the team that we played, and any other thing about these files that would give me the ability to search on and find these files later on. And it doesn't, you can have 100 different keywords in there. We're adding bytes of data to the file, so add as much as you can. More is always better in this situation because it will allow you to find files later on. And then we're going to return to this concept of keywords in a moment, but I'm going to go ahead now and just pull the import trigger. I just have to move my little connect HUD. There we go. Click import. It's going to convert to DNG and it's going to bring it in. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, so let me just click import one more time because this is important, is that there are two things that you need to do that I always forget, even during a demonstration. One, where do you want the files to go? This is up to you to control, your destination. It will remember your destination from time to time to time, so you want to think about this, and it's my recommendation that you create a destination scheme that makes sense. So in this system, I've got a folder for Yearbook that I'm pointing at, and I'm telling it to organize the files into a subfolder for Yearbook called soccer. Now, I might actually go into the soccer folder and create a subfolder that would be for versus Westbrook. That's really a convention that you would decide, but by segregating and organizing your files now, you're going to have a lot better a time managing them later on. The other thing that I always forget to do is to choose rename files and set something about your files. So I'm going to choose rename files, template. Right now it says custom settings. I'm going to edit that. And because this is a Westbrook game, you can see I've got soccer 2014 girls versus Westbrook underscore. And then I've added this little sequence numbering thing. I'll delete that and show you how to add that, because I want all of my Westbrook files for the 2014 season to have a name except for an ascending numbering scheme. So once I set that, then once I choose to import a particular file, it will move those files into the location I chose, apply whatever keywords that I've put in here, and will rename the files. It just gives me 3 different ways to get at those files should I need to find those files later on. The more work you do up front, the better habits you set up front, the better off you're going to be. Now I'm going to open a different catalog because I've actually got this all set up and I've got more files in it. So we're going to go ahead and open this different catalog. And here you can see the same set of files, it's just they're all in now. The next step of working with these files, once you have them in the catalog, is to go through them and eliminate the ones that aren't very good. And here's my workflow for that. I'm in the library module. I'm going to use the film strip view, which is at the bottom by default, and it's just there. I'm going to click on the single image view. And I'm going to use the arrow keys just to go through the images. And all I'm doing is I'm giving this an up or a down vote. Is this a file I want to keep, or is it a file that I literally want to trash? And so when we get over here, this file I don't want to keep. It's just, there's nothing good about it. So I'm going to hit Command or Control down, and that makes it, it gives it a black flag status, which you can see right there at the bottom. There's a little teeny flag there. As I move the files, there's another black flag. Files that I definitely know I want to keep, I'm going to give an up arrow to, or if you're a Redditor, I'm upvoting them. That process, go through that process once immediately after importing your files, and then before you do anything else, under the photo menu, choose Delete Rejected Photos. Get over it. They're not your kids, they're not your friends, they're not your family, they're files that you don't want kicked on, using up disk space that you don't need. If you select Delete Rejected Photos, you'll get the Delete Rejected Photos dialog box. If you click Remove, they'll still be on the hard drive, they won't be in the catalog. I suggest Delete from Disk. If they're blurry, if they're not, if the kids' faces look goofy, those kinds of things, get rid of the files, just be done with them. The other thing about giving them the white flag, Command or Control up arrow, is that then you can start to segregate your work based on so move this up out of my way. You can segregate your based on the work, based on the files that you actually want to bother to work on. So what I'm going to do now is down here at the bottom, you see where it says Filter. I'm going to click once to sort of activate the filter panel, and then click again to filter against only those files that I have white flagged. Now in a tip session, I might have literally 700 files. I might white flag 100 of them, and then I know I've only got an hour to work with, so I'm going to apply some other segregating information here in just a moment as well. I'm going to select this file, and under Photo, I'm going to choose, by the way, I can choose my flags from here, but it's a really good idea to learn your key commands. I'm also going to set a color label, and what I do is anything that I'm definitely going to work on in this session, I give it a yellow color label. And I happen to know that the 7 key is my color label. Learning your key commands in Lightroom is a great thing to do. In fact, I've got a link in the links for you where you can get a quick command key chart for Lightroom that should be helpful. Because if you learn your key commands, you can move through 700 files in the span of 30 minutes. Because first off, you're going to delete most of them. Second off, you very quickly assess which ones are valuable enough to bother to work on. And then when you filter against the flag status, and then you can filter against the color status, these are the 3 files that I have time to work on during the session. And so I'm on these files. I'm not being tempted to go look at other stuff. This is a great way for you to set up a workflow. Frankly, I don't care how you set this workflow up. I'm really trying to show you that these flags, these color labels, and even frankly the star ratings, which I don't tend to use. I use the color labels and the flags, but these star ratings can help you, because then what you can do is begin to segregate among the 700 files. In this case, the 3 that I definitely want to work on, I want to get ready because I'm on deadline, and I know that there's soccer because the athletics, the people who are working on the athletics pages, have told me that they need some soccer photos and they need them toot sweet. So I'm working on them here. Now, before I start doing any other work, the other thing that I'm definitely going to do is I'm going to start going through these to keyword tag these specifically for the content in them. What I mean by that is I'm going to scroll down here on the right-hand side, and you can see that we've got the keyword tags panel. And if I scroll down more, you can see a keyword list. I use these two for every photo. So I'm going to click here in the keyword tags and type in soccer because I didn't actually apply these. I wiped out the keyword so I could show you this. So if I forget to apply these on import, I can come in after the fact and apply them. If I want to apply keywords to multiple files, then in the library module, I'll have to go over to grid view and select them in grid view, and then I can come back in and apply them to multiple files. If I don't do this in grid view, it only applies it to the file that I'm looking at. So if I think I've applied soccer to all three of these files because they're selected in the film strip view, they're not. It's only going to apply it to the files you're looking at. So to avoid that, go to grid view, apply your keywords there. Now for each individual file, I'm going to start going through and applying specific keywords. In this case, this is a team shot. I'm going to call this team. Now I'll also say that my daughter Kiana is in this, and because it's a file I want to keep, I'm going to type her name. Once you've entered in a catalog a keyword into a file, any file, from then on in, that keyword is going to show up in your keywords list here. So as I'm moving through the files, I happen to know that's Kiana behind this person. So all I need to do is just click on her name, and I can very quickly work through the files and say that this is a game, 2014. This process is not sexy. A lot of kids aren't going to think of it as a lot of fun. You probably don't love doing it, but I have to tell you, it's so valuable to be able to, when you've got all your files, so I'm going to turn all my filters off, and I want you to imagine this is 700 files I'm looking at. I want just the ones of Kiana. I can come over here to keyword list, and I can click on the little arrow, and it will only show me those files of Kiana. This is not just good for managing files so that I can get the files of Kiana out and do something with them. This is also good because as a photographer, I can look and say, well, I don't have very many shots of Kiana in this mix. So I want to go ahead and start, I'm going to tell my photographers, get some more shots of Kiana. She's number 3. We need some more of her because she's a captain, and we want to make sure that we're doing a captain's page in the yearbook or something like that. So this can become prescriptive as well as descriptive of the process. Now, once I've gotten all of this done, now I can start going back the files and start working on the files. And this is the place we're going to head over to the develop module. The develop module is all about adjusting for things like exposure and color, the stuff that Jim's really going to talk about in more detail. But I wanted to quickly just walk you through a couple of quick things here. See if I can say quickly one more time. So for example, exposure. The exposure is a little bit hot, so I'm going to bring the exposure down. I'm going to play around with some of these other settings, and again, Jim will talk to you about them, but I'm showing you the 3 settings that I typically use for each file at very least. I'll adjust for exposure. I'll make some adjustment for noise reduction, which will take speckling out of the images. And speckling is something that all digital DSLRs put in the image. Noise reduction is fantastic. It takes it right out. And it doesn't make everything look like it's a watercolor painting either. And then I like a little bit of post-crop vignetting. It just tends to darken the edges, focusing the user's attention in on the middle of the file. Now, the good news about the develop module, nothing you do is permanent there. So you can play to your heart's content, and when you realize you've messed something up, just undo it. Or you can always click reset and start anew. That's the value of having Lightroom write changes into XMP, or not actually edit the file directly, because these changes are something that can be undone a year from now, 100 from now, whatever. The other thing that's good about this workflow, and this is something I do all the time, is that if I want to try different treatments of the same file, all I need to do is do something called create a virtual copy. And all the virtual copies is it says, hey, give me another set of instructions for how to deal with this, and maybe I want to come in here and play around with saturation to create a black and white version and crank the contrast up to create that sort of gritty look. Open up the exposure, and there. Now I've got two files. The file sizes aren't different, or the amount of disk space isn't different. It's just two files that have been treated differently, but it's the same source file to work with. So last but not least for today's session, and I see some questions, so I want to get over and answer those, is once you've gotten your files all set up, then you're probably going to want to export those. And once you have your files chosen, I'm going to go back to the library module. I'm going to go back to grid view, and I'm going to select these three files. I'm going to choose File, Export, and this is where I can choose what I want to actually have, because a raw file is not something you can put in InDesign or on the web. So what you're going to need are export files. First off, export to a specific location of your choosing. It's much better to do this than to choose a specific folder each. Just have Lightroom tell you when you click export, where do you want these files? Secondly, do you want to rename the files on export? And that's not a bad strategy, because even though they're named something in the catalog, you might want to give them to the soccer team. So you might call it Fall Athletic Soccer, and then you can use, with the custom settings, you can change the name and add a sequence there, so you can manage the files that way. Finally, what kind of file do you want? Do you want a JPEG for the web, or are you going to create a yearbook? So maybe you want PSD files to use in InDesign. And if you're going to use JPEG, you're probably also going to want to change the file size in order to be able to make sure that your JPEG files aren't 4,000 pixels wide. Click export, and then Lightroom's going to ask you where you'd like to put them. Just make a export folder, click create, select open, and bada bing, bada boom, you're done. You've got your files. They're files that have been imported, converted to DNG. You've applied a lot of keywords so that you can quickly find them using some of these filtering tools. And there's a whole set of robust filtering tools in the grid view that I didn't even really have time to touch on. But you can start looking for things based on what camera they were shot with, what date they were shot with, what label you've applied. And you can even edit these things to look for a variety of different files for a variety of different ways. Once you've found them, then you can export them over and over again to different use cases, apply different treatments to create really great, interesting looks and feels for the photography, all without doing anything to the original file. So we've got about a minute to go. I'm going to jump over to the Q&A pod here. And
yeah, so there's some questions there for you, Tim. I'll just help you so to save you searching. Jim has answered most of them, but you're safe. But there's one from Mark there. How much do you incorporate Lightroom Mobile into your workflow?
That's an excellent question. Myself personally, I use it a fair amount because I go off-site and I want to show like coaches and parents and things like that the photographs that I have. And I like to do that on my iPad as opposed to whipping open a laptop computer with a projector. And sometimes I'll even have my iPad down on the field, and I'll be talking to like a manager about a couple of things here and there, just showing off some files that I've taken from previous work. So for me, a fair amount. The limiting issue here, though, is that one has to have a Creative Cloud account in order for Lightroom Mobile to work. And so in a yearbook setting where you've got a device workflow where people don't have their own accounts, Lightroom Mobile isn't as effective a tool because you actually can't use it without logging in. But for me, for showing stuff off and for doing a little bit of basic stuff to say, how do you like this look? How do you like this look? It's actually very useful.
Awesome. And a question from Melissa. Do you have any tips for teachers who want to teach this workflow to their student staff photographers?
Well, first off, look at this recording and sort of take a look at the workflow that I've walked through, because that's actually my recommended workflow with respect to working with students, because you've got such a transient audience that if you can't get them to understand that they need to take some of the stuff on when they're moving files onto the system and they need to tag things and whatever, you're going to have a devil of a time trying to find these things. But the good news is that those skills transfer if they want to become photographers, even just for their own use. Those skills transfer. Now, having said that, there are a series of links in the app session links here, where if you look, for example, at Julianne Cost's blog, most of what I do, I've learned in bits and pieces from either Julianne Cost or Terry White, and there's both blogs are actually listed up there. Now, there is also a longer Lightroom session on the EdXchange, and I haven't had a chance to go through it, so there's nothing, I can't vet it and say I totally agree with it, but I suspect that it's probably great because it's a much more detailed look at each of the pieces that I had to cover very, very quickly.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tim, for that. I think that set us up with some really great workflows. I know I realised I have to take more time and do workflows as well. So thank you very much for your time today and for taking time out to do that for us. It's been wonderful. And we'll be posting the recording for this session. You'll be getting an email come through to you with a link to the recording so you can share that with everyone. And I guess we'll see you again this afternoon at 3 p.m. PDT time, which is 8 a.m. Sydney, and I think it's about 6 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you very much. We'll see you later today. Jim will be leading this afternoon session. And Tim, thank you very much for that. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. So I'm going to boot everyone out of the room. Actually, no.